Welcome back to Bore Me to Bed. Tonight we'll drift through the quiet story of how the Great Wall of China was built, slowly, patiently, over centuries. So settle in, let your body soften, and allow the gentle rhythm of history to guide you toward rest. On a gentle slope beneath a quiet evening sky, an ancient wall wanders over the hills. Its stones are tinted gold by the last light of day, glowing softly as the sun sinks low. It winds lazily along the crest of the hills, dipping into a valley and then climbing up the next ridge. In some places, small wildflowers and tufts of grass sprout from between the aged stones, nodding gently in the breeze. The surface of the wall is rough in spots, where wind and rain have chiseled the bricks, and smooth in others, polished by time and countless footsteps. In the distance, each watchtower along the ridge is touched with a halo of dusk light. This is the Great Wall of China, resting in serene silence as it has for centuries. The twilight deepens, gentle shadows gather in the wall's nooks, and the air remains still and calm. A hawk circles overhead without a sound. One can almost feel the echoes of history carried on the light breeze. Each brick, each stone has a story, and together they tell of how a civilization slowly built this immense, winding fortification, piece by piece, long ago. To understand how the Great Wall was built is to journey back into a quieter age, when the clamour of modern life was absent and only the rhythm of human hands and simple tools shaped these stones. It is a story of patience and perseverance, unfolding gently over centuries and across vast landscapes. Year after year, dynasty after dynasty, the wall grew, not in haste, but with steady, careful effort. Let us follow this gentle story back to its beginnings, to see how the wall was born from earth, wood, stone, and the dreams of an ancient people. Long before the Great Wall became one continuous rampart, the idea of walling off danger was already alive in China. We go back more than 2,500 years, to a time when China was not one united land, but a patchwork of small kingdoms and states. Each of these realms had its own borders to guard, and beyond those borders lay uncertainty. To the north, vast grasslands stretched out, home to roaming nomadic tribes who lived on horseback. They were herders and warriors, riding with the wind. Sometimes they would sweep south towards the farming villages, and those settled communities felt vulnerable. In response, the northern kingdoms began to raise walls at their frontiers, hoping to keep their lands safe and peaceful. In those early days, the walls were simple and humble. They were not yet the grand stone battlements we picture today, but they served their purpose quietly. One of the first long walls was built by the state of Qi more than 24 centuries ago. It was essentially a high earthen embankment stretching along the kingdom's border, strengthened here and there with stones and wooden palisades. Other states followed. They dug deep ditches and piled the earth beside them to form ridges, and they drove sturdy wooden stakes into the ground to slow any intruders. These early walls snaked over the hills and fields, sometimes connecting natural cliffs and rivers to form a defensive line. Seen from afar, they must have looked like slender brown lines across green plains, quietly standing guard. Imagine a scene from that ancient time. On a grassy plain, hundreds of labourers from a small kingdom gather to build a simple wall. There are no bricks or mortar yet, only earth, wood, and muscle. Under the supervision of their lord's overseers, lines of workers dig into the brown soil with wooden spades. They heap the dirt onto hide stretchers and into wicker baskets, then drag or carry it a short distance to where the wall is rising. At that line, other labourers pour out the soil and tamp it firm with stone mallets. Slowly, a ridge takes shape, maybe chest high after many days of labour. Men with axes fell nearby trees and sharpened the trunks into stakes. These wooden stakes are driven into the top of the earthen wall side by side, forming a primitive palisade that bristles outward like a hedge of thorns. A ditch is dug along the outside, the extra soil adding to the wall's height. When the work is done, this early fortification stands perhaps as tall as 2 men, modest by later standards, but a significant barrier for its time. The workers wipe sweat from their brows and gaze at what they've built, a quiet bulwark to protect their villages. By twilight, as the labourers depart, the new wall casts a long shadow in the setting sun. A few guards with spears take their posts atop the earthwork, their silhouettes small against the dusk sky. They will keep watch through the night, comforted by the presence of that newly raised wall between them and whatever may lurk in the darkness beyond. In that moment, this rudimentary wall and its vigilant guardians provide a precious sense of security to those who sleep behind it. Through the 3rd century BC, these scattered walls remained separate, each belonging to a different kingdom. But history took a turn. The kingdom of Qian, rising in the west, conquered its rival states one by one. By 221 BC, China was unified under a powerful new emperor, Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor. With the wars between the states over, the emperor looked north, where those nomadic horsemen still roamed. To secure his new empire, he decided to connect the existing border walls into one vast defensive line and extend it farther. This would become the first version of the Great Wall as we think of it. The first emperor wasted no time. He mobilized armies of workers to the northern frontier. Records speak of hundreds of thousands of people pressed into service. Soldiers in armor, peasants taken from their fields, even prisoners condemned to hard labor. They came from all corners of the empire, gathering where the wall would rise. We can imagine them arriving at a hillside camp, carrying their crude tools and baskets, ready to toil on the endless rampart. There is no roar of machinery, only the scuff of straw sandals and boots on dirt, the grunt of lifted loads, and the murmur of human voices as they organize themselves along the wall's planned path. Among these countless laborers, picture one young man's journey. He's a farmer from a southern village, drafted by the emperor's decree. After weeks of walking, he has finally reached the northern hills. Now he stands at the foot of a dusty slope, squinting in the unfamiliar bright light and dry air. The landscape here is parched and rugged. Scrubby bushes and yellow grasses dot the hillside, so different from the green rice paddies of his home. The air carries a mix of scents, dry earth and crushed sagebrush underfoot, mingling with whiffs of wood smoke from distant cooking fires. All around him is activity. Lines of people move like slow streams, carrying wicker baskets full of soil. Up on the ridge above, he can see a nascent wall taking shape, like a brown line along the hill. The young man tightens his grip on the wooden pole across his shoulders. 2 heavy baskets of earth hang from it, balanced at each end. He hears the crunch of gravel under many feet and the distant thud of mallets tamping earth. Taking a deep breath, adjusting his straw hat against the sun, he steps into line with the other workers. All day long he walks back and forth, filling his baskets with dirt from a pit and carrying them to the wall under construction. His shoulders ache from the yoke's weight, but he settles into a steady rhythm, step by step, breath by breath. The sounds around him blend into a quiet music of labour. The soft swish of sand being shoveled, the creak of basket straps, the occasional call of a foreman guiding a large stone into place, the low murmur of men lifting a timber in unison. From another section drifts a gentle chant, a team of labourers tamping earth to a simple song. With each thud of their wooden tampers, they hum or sing a brief melodic line, keeping time together. Their voices rise and fall softly in the hot afternoon, almost like a lullaby against the expanse of silence. The sun climbs high, and the ground shimmers with heat. Sweat beads on the young man's brow and dust clings to his skin, yet he continues at a measured pace. At midday, the workers break briefly. He sets down his yoke and sits on an overturned basket, sipping from a leather water pouch and nibbling on a bit of dry flatbread. Few words are exchanged, only tired smiles of solidarity, as they conserve their energy. Before long, a horn's gentle note summons them back to work. He stands, shoulders the pole once more, and resumes his trek. By late afternoon, he has lost count of how many trips he made. The section of wall he's helping build has visibly grown. It stands several feet taller than it did at dawn. Though exhausted, he feels a quiet pride glimmering inside. His small efforts, repeated over and over, are now part of something far greater rising before him. As evening approaches, shadows lengthen across the camp. At last the day's labours cease. The young man sets down his baskets. The wall section nearby is now chest high, a solid band of packed earth snaking along the ridge. He gazes at it wearily and sees a tangible result of all their toil. When darkness falls, he joins his companions around a small campfire. The night air is cool and still. Overhead, unfamiliar stars spread across the northern sky. Wrapped in a thin blanket, he lies down on the ground, using his rolled-up tunic as a pillow. The outline of the new wall is just visible in the moonlight, a low silhouette against the starry sky. Tired as he is, he feels a mix of homesickness and subdued pride. Perhaps, before sleep takes him, he imagines the wall completed one day, stretching strong and unbroken, protecting the land and the family he left behind. The fire crackles softly, and he closes his eyes. Under the same stars that guided his ancestors, he drifts to sleep, one humble builder among thousands, all contributing to an everlasting monument. Above him, countless stars glimmer coldly, silent witnesses to the monumental work unfolding below. Building the wall in those ancient times required ingenuity and sheer human strength. Without engines or modern tools, every stone and clod of earth had to be moved by muscle power and will. Workers hoisted baskets brimming with soil or rocks onto their shoulders and trudged uphill. Others formed human chains, passing bricks and stones hand to hand up steep slopes. On gentler terrain, wooden carts and wheelbarrows squeaked along, pushed by men straining against the weight. In some places, ropes and pulleys were rigged to hoist heavy stones onto rising walls. Over ravines, long ropes were stretched from cliff to cliff, and baskets of materials were swung across through the air. Every method was humble but effective, relying on patience, countless hands, and simple machines. One step at a time, one basket at a time. In this slow, steady rhythm, the Great Wall grew longer and taller. The construction technique was simple in concept but demanded great care. In many regions, the wall's core was made of compacted earth. Builders erected 2 parallel walls of wood planks or stone as a mould, then filled the gap between them with loose soil, gravel and rubble. Next came the rhythmic tamping. Teams of labourers pounded the fill with heavy wooden mallets, layer by thin layer. You can almost hear the soft, thudding beat as dozens of workers ram the earth in unison. Each layer of earth, only a few inches thick, was pressed down until it became as hard as packed clay can be. Then more soil was added on top and the process repeated. Slowly, layer by layer, the wall rose, like a giant earthen loaf being kneaded and shaped. Once the wooden forms were removed, a solid earthen wall remained, astonishingly hard and stable. Where they could, the builders might face the wall with cut stone or brick on the sides, to armour it against the elements and enemies. But even an unfaced wall of rammed earth proved remarkably durable in the dry northern climate. Over time, its colour blended with the land, a tawny rampart against the green and brown hills. Materials were always gathered locally, so different stretches of the Great Wall looked a bit different depending on the region. In the high mountains, for example, labourers pried large rocks from the slopes and stacked them to form stone walls, using the cliffs themselves as part of the defence. On the plains, where the soil was rich in loess, a fine, wind-blown clay, they packed that earth into firm layers between wooden boards, building earthen ramparts as hard as adobe. In forested areas, wood was abundant. Some walls were essentially wooden stockades reinforced with earth, and in the vast western deserts, where neither ample stone nor solid earth was available, the builders turned to what they had: sand, reeds, and willow. In parts of the Gobi Desert, they created a composite wall by alternating layers of sand with layers of locally cut tamarisk branches and reeds. They would lay a mat of dry shrubs down, cover it with sand, tamp it tight, then add another mat of brush on top. Layer by layer, a surprisingly sturdy wall of sand, plant fibre and gravel rose, up to several metres high. Even after 2,000 years in the harsh sun, traces of these sand and reed walls still stand, gentle mounds in the desert. In this way, the Great Wall was not one uniform structure but many, each section reflecting the character of its landscape and the resourcefulness of its builders. The Great Wall was more than just a barrier, it was also a road and a signalling device. The top was made broad and flat so that troops could march along it. In fact, the first emperor decreed, so the legend goes, that the wall should be wide enough for 6 horses to gallop abreast. A bit of an exaggeration perhaps, but Ming Dynasty walls did reach 15 to 30 feet wide, enough for carts and riders. As they built, The engineers also incorporated beacon towers at intervals, taller structures from which lookouts could survey the surrounding lands. These towers, often placed on hilltops or other high points, formed an ancient telegraph system. If invaders were spotted, guards on a tower would light a fire or send up smoke by day. At night, they'd wave a torch or light a bonfire. The next tower, visible in the distance, would see the signal and do the same, passing the message along. In this way, news of an enemy attack could travel hundreds of miles along the wall in a matter of hours, far faster than a horse could ride. On quiet days, though, the watchtowers simply stood like silent guardians. A sentry might lean on the crenellated parapet, gazing out at the vast horizon of grassland or mountains, with nothing but the wind for company. The wall beneath him would seem almost a natural part of the landscape, peaceful and untroubled unless alarm smoke suddenly smudged the sky. For the soldiers garrisoning the wall in peaceful times, life followed a gentle, repetitive rhythm. At first light, some would climb up to patrol the wall's length nearby, checking for anything amiss. They might pause to sweep away fallen leaves or wind-blown sand collecting against the parapets. They exchanged friendly shouts with their counterparts in the nearest towers, a morning greeting echoing across the gap. Afterward, much of their day was filled with simple chores. They cleaned their swords and spears, oiled leather armour to keep it supple, and mended any torn clothing. Meals were plain, often a warm porridge of millet or rice, eaten with pickled vegetables, and cooking them provided a daily routine. During the midday lull, when the sun was high and shadows short, a few off-duty soldiers might gather under a shaded corner to play a slow game of chess or Go, an ancient board game, using pebbles on a grid scratched into the stone. Others might gamble quietly with dice or small carved tiles, sharing a rare laugh or two. These moments of leisure were small comforts that broke up the long days. They would take turns at sentry duty. Standing on the wall's height, a guard could see a tapestry of land spread out below, perhaps dense forest stretching toward the south, or rolling steppe grasslands fading into haze in the north. He'd watch for anything unusual, a distant dust cloud from riders, migrating animals stirring the brush, storm clouds forming on the horizon. Hours might pass with only the sounds of nature, the cry of an eagle wheeling overhead, the rhythmic chorus of summer cicadas in the trees below, or the whisper of wind through the arrow loops of the towers. Occasionally, the garrison commander ordered a drill to keep everyone alert. A trumpet would sound a sharp note and the soldiers would rush to their stations, hearts thumping, only to discover it was a practice. They'd dutifully light a small signal fire that sent a single coil of smoke into the sky, the prearranged code for all clear, and then snuff it out again. After such exercises, the men would chuckle under their breath and return to their routine, reassured that they remained prepared. As evening approached, the soldiers lit oil lamps or hung lanterns inside the watchtowers. They ate their simple supper together. Maybe someone strummed a pipa, lute, softly, or hummed a hometown song as stars blinked into view. A few might write letters home by flickering candlelight, describing the quiet mountains and the wall in their diary or to family, while others, perhaps more literate, read ancient poetry to their comrades. In the cool night, 2 or 3 men stayed on watch atop the tower, peering into the starlit darkness for any sign of movement, but seeing only the dim outline of the wall stretching away and hearing only night crickets. Within the thick tower walls, most of the garrison slept on their pallets, feeling the solid stone under them and knowing that this grand wall was their duty and their home. Day after day, month after month, this life went on, a steady, undramatic service, guarding an empire in slumber. This immense endeavour did not come without human cost. The labour was crushing, and conditions often harsh. Many workers never returned home. It's said their lives became part of the wall itself, quietly interred in its foundation. Chinese folklore calls the Great Wall the longest cemetery on Earth. A long graveyard, as one bitter saying goes, because so many died building it. One famous legend from the Qin era is the story of Lady Meng Jiangnu. According to this tale, her husband was sent north to work on the wall not long after their marriage. When winter came and he hadn't returned, Meng Jiangnu braved the long journey to bring him warm clothes. Upon arrival, she learned that her beloved husband had perished from exhaustion and that he was buried somewhere within the gigantic earthen wall. Stricken with grief, Meng Jiangnu sat at the foot of the wall and wept for days on end. She cried so bitterly that, as the legend goes, a lengthy stretch of the wall collapsed, exposing the bones of the thousands who had died, among them her husband's remains. This allowed her to give him a proper burial. Though just a folk tale, the story of Meng Jiangnu reflects the profound sorrow people associated with the wall's construction. It personifies the wall's human cost in the figure of a heartbroken wife, and has been told for generations as a lament for those who toiled and died far from home. Such images of loss are solemn indeed. Yet, despite all the suffering behind its making, the Great Wall achieved its immediate purpose. By the end of the first emperor's reign, a continuous barrier stretched across China's northern frontier, from the dry western hills to the eastern sea. The first Great Wall, earth and stone fused by human sweat and tears, stood its silent vigil, a great sleeping dragon guarding the realm. The Han Dynasty, 206 BC to 220 AD, followed the short-lived Qin and eventually extended the Great Wall even further. The Han emperors expanded the empire westward, opening up the fabled Silk Road trade routes towards Central Asia. To protect these caravans and mark the empire's new boundaries, they repaired and lengthened the wall out into the remote deserts and mountains of the northwest. Imagine an imperial surveying team venturing into those wilds, officers and soldiers riding out beyond the last farmsteads, unrolling maps and measuring distances by counting their horses' steps, deciding where a new wall should run. Out in the deep west, they established a fortified gate known as Yumen Pass, the Jade Gate, an oasis outpost beyond which lay endless dunes and the vast skies of Turkestan. Here, the Great Wall's western terminus was built using the scarce resources available. Instead of stone or bricks, the Han workers layered sand and gravel, reinforced by reeds and willow branches from distant riverbanks. They sank wooden posts into the desert floor to create a frame, then filled it with alternating strata of sand and brush. Bit by bit, a ridge several meters high rose, snaking across the barren Gobi. Amazingly, sections of this sand and reed wall have endured to this day, surviving in that dry climate like ghosts of walls, marking the lonely frontier where China met the wild unknown. One can picture a detachment of Han soldiers and labourers at that windswept outpost, working under a searing blue sky. The sun glares down on a landscape of yellows and browns. Distant dunes waver in the heat haze. The only sounds are the crunch of boots on crusted ground and the steady thump of tampers. Some men gather brush and reeds from a rare streambed oasis, bundling the green-brown stalks under their arms. Others dig a broad trench in the loose sand, creating a foundation line. The work here is like weaving the earth itself, a novel method for a novel environment. The workers lay down a thick carpet of reeds as the first layer, forming a rough mat across the desert floor. Next, another team shovels sand atop the reed layer, about a foot deep, smoothing it out. Then come the tampers, heavy wooden pounders lifted and dropped to pack the sand tight. A dull thud rhythm beats in the still air as several men stomp or hammer the ground in unison. As they compress the sand, it binds with the reed layer beneath, creating a surprisingly firm base. Then another layer of dry reeds is spread on top, and more sand on that pounded flat again. Layer upon layer, the wall slowly gains height like a giant multi-layered cake, each stratum of sand held in place by the lattice of dried plants. The men work steadily, unhurried but relentless. A few camels rest nearby with baggage. They've hauled bundles of reeds and barrels of precious water from afar. One camel idly chews on a tuft of sparse grass, indifferent to the building work. Now and then, a small dust devil whips up, a twisting wisp of sand dancing across the plains until it vanishes. The soldiers pause to wipe sweat and grit from their faces and adjust cloth scarves over their mouths. In the distance, the squat earthen fort of the Jade Gate shimmers. Inside its courtyard, supplies and a cool well await when this day's work is done. The officer in charge stands with arms clasped behind him, surveying the new wall as it inches forward through the desert. He knows that once completed, this wall will help secure the Silk Road, protecting merchants and imperial envoys who venture westward. By late afternoon, the crew has built perhaps a few dozen more yards of wall. It's not high, chest high or a bit more, but pushing against it, they find it solid. Satisfied, they begin to pack up for the day. The harsh sunlight softens to gold as the sun dips low. Their shadows stretch long over the sand as they gather their tools. A gentle sense of achievement fills the air. In this vast emptiness, they have raised a barrier to make the empire just a little more secure. As dusk settles, a soldier climbs a watchtower at the fort and lights a small signal fire, an all's well custom at sundown. The flame flickers bright for a moment before he douses it, sending a thin curl of smoke up into the twilight. The men finish a simple meal of dried dates and flatbread, washed down with water as cool as they can keep it. In the gathering dark, they roll out mats to sleep on the desert floor near their new wall. The stars overhead are astonishingly bright in the clear, dry air. One by one, the workers fall asleep under their blankets, the new wall section beside them now blending into the silent dunes under the night sky. Over the centuries, techniques and tools evolved quietly. The Chinese invented the wheelbarrow, and by Han times it was being used on the wall. A single wheel with handles allowed one man to move bricks equivalent to what 2 or 3 might carry. Oxen and horses were used to pull larger carts on flatter stretches, and camels formed long caravans carrying supplies to far-flung building sites. In steep mountain country, people found ingenious ways to lighten the load. One legend holds that on a perilous slope, the builders enlisted local mountain goats to help. These sure-footed animals could climb where humans struggled. Workers supposedly tied bricks onto goats, strapping small ones to their horns or backs, and coaxed them up narrow trails to the mountaintop work sites. It's a fanciful image. A goat hopping effortlessly from rock to rock, a brick dangling on each side as astonished labourers followed behind and retrieved the materials at the summit. Whether or not such things truly happened, they show the creative spirit that surrounded the Great Wall's construction. The builders were willing to try anything, no matter how quirky, to overcome the immense challenges they faced, and bit by bit, every minor innovation, every clever trick, made the monumental labour just a little more manageable. The centuries flowed by. China saw periods of unity and of fragmentation, and the Great Wall too saw cycles of neglect and revival. When powerful dynasties expanded deep into Central Asia or Manchuria, the frontier moved beyond the old walls. Those sections were often left unguarded to crumble quietly, overtaken by weeds. But whenever a threat loomed again on the northern steppes, China turned once more to its long wall. Different dynasties repaired breached segments or built new walls further north. In the 6th century, for example, the northern Qi kingdom, embattled by rivals and nomads, constructed or enhanced walls 6 times in a few decades, racing to plug gaps and guard vital passes. Emperors and generals 1,000 years apart essentially played variations on the same theme, fortifying the northern border to keep enemies out. Through all the rises and falls, the idea of the Great Wall persisted like a refrain through history. Over those epochs, from the first simple earthen barriers to the final brick ramparts of the 17th century, the building of the wall spanned roughly 2 millennia. Generation after generation played their part, often not living to see the wall's completion, yet each contributing to its growth. All in all, the segments built by various dynasties eventually totaled about 21,000 kilometres, over 13,000 miles, of walls across northern China. That astonishing length includes many branches and parallel lines of fortification. If one imagines all those sections laid end to end, they could loop back and forth across a continent. It's even said that if all the stones and bricks used in the wall were assembled, they would build a wall around Earth's equator. A hyperbole, perhaps, but one that conveys the enormous quantity of material moved. By one estimate, over 100 million tons of earth, brick and stone were used to create the Great Wall in its many forms, an almost inconceivable volume shaped by human hands. In total, the wall's construction stretched over 2,300 years, involving roughly 90 generations of labourers. It's humbling to think that 90 generations passed the torch, father to son, mother to daughter, building, rebuilding, watching the horizons and adding to the wall bit by bit. Each generation's work, even if it eroded or fell, laid the foundation for the next. And so, the Great Wall grew into the monumental presence that winds across the land today. At last, in the 14th century, one of the greatest building chapters began: the Ming Dynasty's restoration and expansion of the Great Wall. The Ming emperors, having overthrown the Mongol Yuan dynasty in 1368, faced anew the perennial challenge of securing their northern frontier. They remembered all too well how Mongol horsemen had once swept through, toppling cities and thrones. Determined not to let history repeat, the Ming leadership looked to the wisdom of the ancestors, strengthen the walls. What they undertook was perhaps the most ambitious fortification project in history, to rebuild and reinforce the old walls on an unprecedented scale and to erect new fortifications where needed. The result is much of the imposing Great Wall we are familiar with today. The Ming engineers transformed the Great Wall from tamped earth into a mighty edifice of stone and brick. They deliberately chose the most advantageous terrain, tracing the wall along high ridges and mountain crests whenever possible. Up on those rocky spines, a wall could run like a stone spine itself, taking full advantage of sheer slopes as natural defences. One can imagine a team of Ming surveyors standing on a mountain peak at dawn, pointing along the jagged range and deciding, "Here the wall shall go." On those ridges, the wall indeed looks like a graceful ribbon draped over the peaks. But this elegance was also practical. Any invader would first have to climb the mountain itself, under potential fire from above, before even reaching the wall perched at the summit. In this way, under Ming guidance, the Great Wall became a continuous dragon of stone, scaling craggy mountains and spanning rivers to shield the heartland within. Such a colossal enterprise required immense preparation and organisation. The Ming authorities established dedicated workshops, foundries, and brick kilns all along the intended wall route. Huge brick furnaces glowed day and night near the work sites, baking clay into tens of millions of bricks. In the villages near the wall, many common folk became brickmakers virtually overnight, conscripted or paid to supply the endless demand for materials. Before dawn, carts laden with sticky clay trundled from nearby pits to the kilns. Workers mixed the clay with water and temper, perhaps sand or straw, stomping it underfoot until it reached the right consistency, neither too stiff nor too runny. They shoveled the clay into wooden moulds, making wet green bricks, and turned them out to dry a little in the open air. All day long, a procession of these damp bricks went into the kilns, large domed ovens of brick and earth. Inside, brickmakers stacked thousands of raw bricks carefully, leaving channels so heat could circulate. They sealed the kiln and lit great fires using wood, charcoal or coal. The kilns roared with flames for days, tended constantly by sweating men who monitored the heat, adding fuel through small openings and controlling airflow by adjusting brick flues. At night, a red glow emanated from the kiln vents, and the smell of baked earth drifted on the wind. After the firing, when the kiln cooled, they opened it and drew out the finished bricks. A good batch of bricks was a brickmaker's pride. The bricks would ring with a clear, bell-like tone when struck, a sign of solidity. And indeed, Ming bricks were of high quality. Many survive today, their maker's marks still visible. Workers loaded the new bricks onto wheelbarrows or ox carts to be hauled to the wall. Meanwhile, stone was also being cut. In rocky areas, masons split boulders into rectangular blocks, which would form the outer faces of the wall. Lumber was gathered to build scaffolding and gates. Lime was fired in small kilns to make lime mortar, and the Ming builders enhanced this mortar with a secret ingredient from their kitchens, sticky rice paste. They cooked glutinous rice into a thick porridge and mixed it with slaked lime. The result was an unusually strong mortar that hardened like concrete and was remarkably water-resistant. Amazingly, it still binds many Ming bricks so tightly that in some places weeds cannot find purchase between them. Modern chemists discovered that the amylopectin from the rice made the mortar especially cohesive and tough. Thanks to this sticky rice mortar and the careful kiln-fired bricks, the Ming wall was built to last. Even after centuries of wind and rain, much of it stands almost as firm as when newly built. As materials arrived, the wall rose again under the hands of millions. Typically, the builders first laid down a broad foundation. In many places, the Ming wall's foundations were an earthen core, but on that base they built up walls of brick and stone. We can picture lines of labourers stepping upward on wooden scaffolds, passing bricks from hand to hand. Each brick was laid in fresh mortar and tapped into place, forming neat rows. The wall's design often featured an outer layer of stone or brick, and an inner filling of rubble and earth, the best of both worlds, solid and weighty but less expensive than all brick. As it gained height, The wall would be about 20 to 30 feet tall and perhaps 15 to 25 feet thick at the base, tapering slightly towards the top. It was truly a massive structure, wide enough on top for soldiers to march in columns or even for carts and horses to move along. The workers built stairways and gentle ramps along the interior side to allow access to the top, and they cleverly inserted drainage outlets at intervals so that rainwater wouldn't pool and erode the wall's core. To ensure accountability and quality, Ming commanders even had many bricks stamped or inscribed with the name of the kiln or the troop unit that made them. Some of those bricks can still be seen in the Great Wall today, faintly marked with dates or battalion numbers, a direct signature of the people behind them. It must have been a striking sight during construction. Thousands of workers arrayed on the ridges, scaffolding hugging the wall's sides, pulleys lifting baskets of mortar, chisels clinking as stones were shaped to fit, and a constant chain of human hands relaying bricks upward. From afar, the wall in progress would have looked like a grey ribbon slowly thickening and growing along the mountain tops, accompanied by the buzz of human activity and the occasional snap of a foreman's whip, urging greater effort. For the Ming were strict taskmasters, though not as cruel as the Qin legend. Day by day, the wall ascended. As it reached full height, they added the finishing touches: parapets with crenellations, the familiar battlements with gaps to shoot through, crowned the top on both sides, turning the walkway into a protected rampart. In some places, they even installed large stone tablets carved with inscriptions commemorating the wall's completion or extolling the emperor's virtues in securing his realm. The Ming wall bristled with defensive features, all carefully thought out yet now appearing simply as picturesque ruins. Along the outer edge of the top ran the notched battlements with regular merlons and embrasures, cover for archers and musketeers. Some embrasures, loopholes, were specially designed to accommodate early firearms and cannons, reflecting the advancement of warfare by the 16th century. The wall's interior side often had a low parapet as well, to prevent people from accidentally tumbling off the high walkway. Every so often, the monotonous rampart was broken by a towering presence, the watchtowers. These were built at strategic intervals, often 2 arrow shots apart, so they could support each other in defence. They rose a story or two higher than the wall, rectangular or square in shape, with sturdy brick walls and narrow windows. They served multiple roles: blockhouses where guards could live, armories storing weapons and gunpowder, and of course, lofty watchposts. Some towers had flat roofs where a beacon fire could be lit atop an earthen platform. Others had pitched roofs of tile to protect against rain. A patrol walking the wall might go from tower to tower, each usually within sight of the next. In times of alert, each tower became a self-contained fort, with its handful of guards peering carefully through the windows for any sign of movement beyond the wall. The Ming had a whole signal system. One smoke signal might mean a small enemy force, 2 signals a larger one, and so on. A kind of coded message transmitted by fire and smoke. But most of the time, the towers simply gazed emptily at the surrounding lands. One can imagine a quiet night in one such tower. A few soldiers bundled in cloaks around a small brazier of coals for warmth, the stone walls dimly lit by their lantern, perhaps sharing stories in low voices. Looking out a narrow slit window, one guard sees the vast dark outline of mountains under starlight, and maybe far on another ridge, the tiny glow of another tower's fire where his comrades also keep watch. In peaceful times, these towers were lonely outposts, but not cheerless. The men on duty knew that in the next tower miles away, others were awake too, sharing the same cold night. In that thought there was a sense of camaraderie. Many journals from soldiers on the wall in later eras mention the strange beauty of the landscape and the solemn pride of being out at the wall's end guarding their country. The Ming Wall, fully manned, was like a living chain of people stretching across the mountains, each within shouting or signalling distance of the next, forming a continuous guardian line. Special attention was given to major passes, the places where roads or rivers cut through the mountains, as these were the natural gateways that enemies or traders alike would use. At such points, the Ming constructed elaborate fortress complexes. A pass fortress typically had a massive arched gatehouse, often 3 stories high, flanked by curtain walls. Behind the first gate might lie a killing ground, courtyard, enclosed by a second semicircular wall, creating a trap for any intruder who broke through. Multi-layered defense was the rule. If a foe smashed through the wooden gates, they would find themselves in a courtyard with archers firing from all sides above and then have to face yet another gate. Some passes had moats and drawbridges as well. Two of the most famous passes mark the Great Wall's extremities. In the east, Shanhai Pass guarded the narrow strip between the mountains and the Bahai Sea. Here, the Great Wall actually plunges into the sea at a point poetically called Old Dragon's Head, as if the wall were a great stone dragon drinking from the ocean. It must have been a spectacular sight for travellers coming by boat. Waves lapping against the barnacled stones of the wall's seaward end, gulls wheeling above the watchtowers. In the west, Jiayu Pass commanded the desert approach. Standing at Jiayu Pass, one would face endless desert and snow-capped mountains beyond. It was truly the edge of Chinese civilization in that direction. The fort at Jiayu was a robust mud brick and brick fortress with multiple gates and towers, guarding the entrance to the fertile Hexi corridor. These passes were the vital valves in the wall. Through them flowed trade, tribute and envoys, with permission, or battle and bloodshed when enemies forced their way. They were built to be formidable. The great gates of Shanhai and Jiayu were like the front doors of the empire, beautifully carved and reinforced with iron, once painted and gilded with the emperor's seal. Through Shanhai Pass, for instance, ran the main road from Beijing to Manchuria. Ming generals stood on its lofty ramparts looking out to the Great Wall curving away over the hills and the blue expanse of the Bohai Gulf beyond. Behind them lay the road to the capital only 300 kilometers away, a road that had to be defended at all costs. At Jiayu Pass, travellers on the Silk Road felt they were truly leaving China as they passed out the western gate and saw the Great Wall end abruptly in the open desert. An inscription there famously warned travellers, "If you leave this gate, you are no longer a person of China." Such was the significance these gates held in the Chinese mind. For the Ming Dynasty builders and soldiers, the Great Wall was a generational commitment. The Ming court maintained a standing army of frontier guards along the wall, the 9 border garrisons, whose duty was both to defend and to continue improving the fortifications. Year after year, these garrisons repaired weather damage, built new watchtowers, dug new moats, and even constructed inner or outer parallel walls in some critical areas. Over nearly 2 centuries, roughly 1470s to 1620s, the Ming Great Wall was refined and expanded. Many workers would spend a season or more away from their homes to labour on the wall. In spring, after the thaw, construction resumed in earnest. Bricks could be fired again, lime slaked, and the earth easier to dig. Through the hot summers the work went on, punctuated by the droning of cicadas in the forests and sudden thunderstorms that slicked the clay. Autumn, with clearer air and the distant hills turning gold and crimson, was perhaps the most pleasant time for building, and the labourers may have found moments to admire the beauty of the maple leaves swirling down onto the high ramparts. Winter brought most construction to a halt. The mortar wouldn't set in the freezing cold, and mountain passes filled with snow, making transport dangerous. During those cold months, garrisons focused on patrolling and stockpiling materials for spring. One can envision a team of soldiers shoveling snow off the wall's top on a bright winter day, their breath steaming, to keep the patrol path clear even in the cold season. Then at last, spring came again, and the cycle of building resumed. In this way, the Ming Great Wall was not built in one push, but in a patient, almost rhythmic progression, aligned with the seasons and the dynasty's fortunes. For those directly involved, life on the wall was both hard work and unique camaraderie. Imagine a Ming camp of wall builders in the evening, dozens of small campfires flickering in the dusk along a newly built stretch of wall. Around each fire, workers huddle, warming rice dumplings or flatbread on the embers. They chat in low voices about their homes, about how many more months until they return, about the rumours from the capital. A gentle wind blows along the wall, carrying with it the mingled smell of wood smoke and cooked millet. The enormous wall they built looms beside them, now quiet and still after the day's clamour. Under the vast canopy of stars, these labourers who sweated together feel a bond like family. In those gentle moments of rest, the Great Wall under construction must have felt less like an imperial command and more like a collective achievement, A community of workers gathered under open sky, united by a monumental task. As the firelight dances on their tired faces, perhaps they feel that despite the hardship, they are part of something meaningful, protecting their loved ones far away, contributing to a bulwark that will stand for ages. Under the fading light, their exhaustion is tempered by a quiet pride and fellowship. By the mid-17th century, the era of Great Wall building drew to a close. The Ming Dynasty fell in 1644, undone by internal rebellion and a new external foe, the Manchus, who would establish the Qing dynasty. The irony was that the Manchus breached the Great Wall not so much by force as by exploiting a gate opened by a Ming general who had been bribed or allied with them. The Qing dynasty expanded China's frontiers far to the north and west beyond the limits of the wall. Thus, the Great Wall's role as a frontline defence quietly diminished under Qing rule. It was no longer along the active border of the empire. Over time, maintenance of the wall was largely neglected. Some garrisons remained, but many watchtowers fell silent. Sections of the wall that had stood proud began to surrender to nature's slow caress. Roof tiles blew off in storms, exposing rammed earth cores to erosion. Bricks tumbled from isolated stretches, and the wind carried away the dust of their mortar. Grass and wildflowers sprouted between the stones, and trees took root atop once busy ramparts, their roots prying apart the masonry. In some places, local villagers treated the derelict wall like a convenient quarry, prying out baked bricks to build their own courtyards, or taking stones to line wells and pigsties, not realising, or not caring, that they were dismantling history. And yet, even as parts of it crumbled, much of the Great Wall endured simply by its inertia, too massive and remote to disappear quickly. Through centuries without soldiers or repairs, long stretches remained, marking the old frontier's path. A traveller in the 19th century could follow the Great Wall for days and scarcely see another soul, encountering it as a giant relic overgrown with shrubs, its towers home only to bats and the occasional owl. Villagers grazed sheep on it, and the wall's top made a convenient elevated road for those who knew the way. Some merchants even used it as a guide route, its broken outline leading them from one market town to another. People living near often took it for granted, an old wall winding over the hills, presence as ordinary as a river or ridge. But the wall never fully faded from memory or significance. It remained, weathered but unbroken in spirit, a monument to a bygone era of heroes and tyrants, suffering and triumph. Today, the Great Wall still snakes across northern China, in various states of repair, some portions carefully restored to their former glory, others left wild and crumbling, visited only by the wind and occasional hikers. It stands as one of the most remarkable monuments in human history, a World Heritage Site and a symbol of China itself. People from all over the globe travel to walk upon its ancient stones, marvelling at its scale and at the perseverance of those who built it. If you visit a quiet section of the Great Wall in the late afternoon, you might feel a profound calm there. Climb up the stone steps at a mountain pass and stand atop the wall as the sun begins to set. The wall stretches before you towards the horizon, gently following the contours of the mountains like a peaceful grey ribbon laid over the land. The air, especially in autumn, might carry the crisp scent of dry grass and a hint of wild mountain flowers that grow along the ruined ramparts. Throughout the year, the wall takes on the character of the seasons. In springtime, fresh green tendrils and wild blossoms peek out between the bricks, dotting the grey ruin with soft colours and life. In summer, under the bright sun, the stones radiate warmth. Butterflies flit above the battlements, and little lizards bask on the ledges. In autumn, the surrounding hills blaze with gold and red foliage, forests of oak, elm, and maple turning colour, and the wall winds through this tapestry of autumn hues, serene in the clear, cool air. In winter, snow often settles on the wall's broad back, outlining it in white against the brown landscape. It becomes a quiet white road under a pale sun, with icicles sometimes hanging from the watchtower eaves. Each season brings a unique beauty, but always the wall stands silent, enduring, and somehow comforting in its permanence. Stand quietly and place your palms against the rough stone parapet. Feel the sun's leftover warmth on the brick mingling with the chill of the approaching dusk. In that moment, you touch history. These bricks are the same that soldiers leaned on centuries ago. You might even find, on some restored sections, the faint engraved marks or Chinese characters left by their makers. Imagine all those hands that have touched these stones, the calloused, earth-stained hands of labourers who set them in place, the leather-gloved hands of Ming soldiers gripping the battlements as they scanned the northern plains, and now your own hands, bridging across time. Walk slowly along the wall's top path. It undulates gently over the ridges, leading you to a watchtower a short distance ahead. You enter the old tower through a tall archway. Inside, it's cool and shaded. Dust motes float in a beam of late sunlight that slants through a narrow window. The stone floor is worn smooth by the feet of long-departed watchmen. On one wall, you notice something carved in the plaster. Perhaps a few Chinese characters scratched long ago, recording a name, a date, or a poem by a bored guard. You sit on a stone bench built into the tower's wall and look out through the arrow slit. Far below lies a patchwork of fields and villages. You might see a farmer leading an ox or children playing by a stream, their tiny laughter too far to hear. Everything is peaceful. A soft breeze sighs through the windows, bringing the scent of grass and distant wood smoke from an evening fire somewhere. You close your eyes for a moment. The wall beneath you is solid and reassuring. It's easy to imagine that if you keep very still, you can sense something of the past in the air. In the silence, the Great Wall seems almost to breathe, exhaling memories. As twilight deepens, you might fancy you hear faint echoes carried on the wind. Perhaps the far-off thud of an earthrammer, or the ghostly murmur of voices from a long-ago work gang at the base of the wall, not truly there, of course, but conjured by knowing what happened here. The battlements around you once saw vigilant sentries pacing and torches flaming into the night. Now they feel only the touch of gentle rain and the fall of autumn leaves. The wall that was once alive with armies is now a place of quiet reflection. Night approaches. The sky above turns from deep blue to black, and countless stars awaken overhead. The silver moon, nearly full, rises above the mountains, casting a soft glow on the Great Wall as it rolls over the hills like an endless undulating silhouette. In the moonlight, the wall looks otherworldly, almost like a stairway for the moonbeams, climbing ridge after ridge, tranquil and eternal. Standing there, you feel time slow down. 2,000 years or more have passed since the first walls were built, and yet here you are, breathing the same night air, under the same moon, on the same wall. The continuity of it all is profoundly soothing. Ultimately, the Great Wall is more than just an old fortification. It's a tapestry of human effort and experience. Every winding mile holds the imprint of those who conceived it, built it, and guarded it. It stands as a monument to what a society can achieve with collective will and perseverance. For the Chinese people, the wall became a symbol of national resilience, a physical manifestation of the resolve to preserve their world against hardships. Even after its military importance waned, the wall lived on in story and memory as a unifying thread through China's past. To touch its weathered stones is to touch history directly, to connect with nameless millions who, in their own quiet ways, gave this wall its life. It is at once an architectural marvel, a historical record, and a poetic inspiration. One poet described the wall as a long scrawl of ink across the mountains, as if the ancient builders had written their dedication across the earth itself. The wall speaks of diligence, endurance, and the deep yearning for security and peace that is common to all human hearts. And so, the tale of how the Great Wall was built ends not with a dramatic climax, but with a gentle fading of centuries into the present. What remains is both the physical wall and the countless stories it carries. It is a story of ordinary days of work that together wrought something extraordinary. A story of human determination stretching over windswept deserts and high, lonely mountains, of backs bent under loads, of hands cracked by cold and mortar, of dreams and sacrifices laid into the bricks. Now the Great Wall simply rests. It no longer serves as a line of battle or a border between empires. Instead, it stands as a silent, enduring witness to history, a guardian of memory keeping watch over quiet hills. Under the stars and rising moon, it invites us to ponder the long, gentle tales of its stones. In this peaceful moment, you can almost feel time slow to the wall's own ancient pace, as the Great Wall of China keeps its timeless watch, calmly enduring through the ages. Under the care of that silent guardian, you may let your eyes grow heavy and find rest. The Great Wall, timeless, unmoving, continues its quiet vigil through the night. You can drift off gently, feeling safe and at peace as another day comes to a close under its enduring watch. Good night.